from, as you can probably tell from the accent, but I'm actually out here in Silicon Valley, in Milpitas in California, where it's a stunning day. I've been here for a couple of weeks. It rained all last week, and today it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a busy day here today. I've got two major things happening right now. I've got you guys for the next hour or for the next 40 minutes. Just across the hall, actually I say across the hall, which is huge, and across sort of half a building, I've got a beta of a new training course, which is the culmination of about 6 months' work rolling out. And that's where I'm going to be for the next 3 days, making notes about what works and what doesn't work. With a room full of techies who know far more than I know, but let's see where we go from there. Anyway, so here today we're going to talk about xAPI and learning. You'll notice I call it a can of worms. Bobby says the next big thing. I'd love to be able to say there are no big things in the world we work in. I think all of these together are all just new tools that go into our toolbox, and each of them will enhance what we're actually doing. Thank you for what you said. I guess I've been around in L&D for 25 years. I hate to call it the learning world because we can't actually create learning. This is something that they do. That they learn. We can create an environment that people will learn in, and I think that I've always said that e-learning was probably one of the worst words, one of the worst terms we ever came up with. I've been very controversial over 25 years, and I don't care. My tagline has always been that I will break every rule to ensure success, and hopefully we'll do a bit more of that this morning. The concept of where we are today is to talk about xAPI. I'm not going to talk about it from a technical level. I'm going to give a little bit of technical for those techies amongst you. If you want more techie, just raise your hand now, which is the little icon with the hand on it, and I'll know that I should get a bit more techie. I don't want to get too deep into the technical. What I want to do today is to sort of show you what this is and what we can do with it, because there's more to this than actually meets the eye, and there's more to it than I think the few people who are selling it are actually selling us. So I'm always one to try and discover what can I do with this technology that's going to really pay off. So with that, let's move on. Since the beginning, and I do mean since the beginning, let's go back to, I'm not sure when you believe, and maybe you'd like to type in the box when you think e-learning started. Be interested, but since the beginning we've searched for a couple of things. I'm a completely separate presentation one day maybe for you guys. We'll talk about ROI and the fact that I believe there is no ROI in learning. There's something called VOI, value of learning. But we've talked little really else other than ROI and completion rates. And one of the things that I'm a firm believer of is that if we want to find out how successful we've been, is not to look at completion rates, but actually find out if there's been a change in behavior. I'm a senior instructional designer here at FireEye. If you haven't heard of FireEye, I'll give you a quick 2 minutes. Thank you. At last, Plato, absolutely. Plato was a good start, Paul. Thank you. The first piece of software I think I used to actually create learning was Tencore, which was a very interesting piece of technology in the day that it was. So it's been around some time. I'm a firm believer that if we can actually look at behavior and see if behavior has taken place or change of behavior has taken place, then I think we've actually won. If we're in this just to see whether we've transferred some supposed knowledge and give people a multiple choice guess test at the moment that they have just finished being given the information, then actually we're looking at this in the wrong direction. And Bobby, you said something very interesting about different people have different views of what an instructional designer is. An instructional designer is more than somebody who knows how to install Articulate, as far as I'm concerned. An instructional designer is somebody who actually creates learning or training or some form of behavior change. And I'll come on to that. And I believe there is a time for a change, and on the back of that, xAPI is a perfect way of creating a blend that we haven't seen to create before. So what am I going to brush on today? I'm going to talk about, will xAPI help you in your organization? Will it help in, where will it help as well as an interesting point, but will it help the student? Does big data scare you? I'd be interested to see whether anybody wants to put anything in the box where the big data scares you. And I'm going to brush on something that I call little data. I think little data is more important than big data, and we'll brush on that. I'm going to talk about environments. Should we be building environments and not a course? And can we use xAPI to manage our environment? And do we need all the data? And if so, what do we do with it? And I'm going to look at how we measure behavior using xAPI. And Paul, there's an interesting question throughout. How much does it cost? Actually, the answer is, if you want to start using it tomorrow, the answer is nothing. You can do this for $0. Yes, you can go out, you can speak to the couple of people who are out there. There's only a few companies who are actually specializing in it. I am not affiliated to anybody, so I'm going to get that very, very upfront. The two big players in this are Saltbox and Rustici, and there are lots and lots and lots of learning management system companies who are toying and playing and adding. But if you wanted to implement it tomorrow, you could implement it absolutely free, gratis. All you need to do is to go to the ADL website. You can download an open source copy of an LRS, a learning resource system, a learning record store, and you can download the documents that actually show you how to create and write your own statements. So you can do it for absolutely for $0. And I'm not going to get into talking about, I see Paul, you've said, does it work with Blackboard? I'm not going to get into talking about will it work with individual products. I'm not going to talk about any product at all today. I made a rule a long time ago that when I do this type of thing, and if you want to talk to me about products, draw me into a conversation outside of here, and I'll give you my details at the end. So let's have a look at where this comes from, where this goes, etc. And I'm going to first start with something called the scatter approach. I was always told at the beginning when I started in the training world, never mention religion, never mention sex, never mention any of these things that you shouldn't talk. So I'm going to talk about religion this morning. But I'm going to talk about it in a different way, so don't knock me for it, please. Hang on. I want to introduce you to a guy called Philip Howard. Whether or not you agree with this guy's mission, this guy is a very dedicated man. Now, I am politics as well, but we can get into politics anytime we like. I see that in the chat box. Every morning, this guy gets up, he packs some leaflets, he packs a sandwich, he packs a flask of tea, his Bible and a megaphone, and he travels to a very carefully selected street corner, or so he did for a long time. He went to a place where he knew a lot of people would pass, and in fact, let's move onwards. He went to Oxford Circus Station in the middle of London. This place is huge. He stood at the top of the stairs where people come out every morning, and there's about 250,000 people walk past this guy every single day. Anybody who's been through there would know that this is really busy. This takes about 5 or 6 minutes to get from the bottom of the stairs to the top of the stairs. So he had a captive audience. Very interesting. 20 minutes from the entrance, this guy set himself up and he had his megaphone. And what he did, quite deliberately, was he barracked, I think is the word. He said to people things like, you wouldn't be losing so much hair if you prayed to God. You wouldn't be so much overweight if you hadn't let God pass you by. And he intimidated people. Well, they did a study on this guy, really very interesting. They did a study over a period of time to see how much information he got across, and did he actually have any effect. So there was about 100 conversations. People had conversations walking up the stairs. You know, as you walk up the stairs, you're sitting next to someone, you're being barracked by this guy, and he's talking about this poor woman who's overweight, or the guy with no hair, or you could have bought better shoes had God not passed you by. People blogged about this, and there's about 100 conversations on a blog, which is very, very interesting. And he had this wonderful saying, don't be a sinner, be a winner. Now, that became a success. People actually remembered it, saw it, talked about it. But it was also unequivocal that the collateral effect of his presence was counterproductive. Every comment was negative. People claimed to be put off by the specific message. And in fact, people got put off completely around everything that was associated with it, Christianity, the church, the whole thing, and religion in general. So he had a negative effect as well as a positive effect. Now, we wanted to try and analyze this message, and the concept was that from a learning perspective, if we blandly scattered approached our messages as we do in some learning material, are we actually having an effect? And here was a perfect example of a guy who was trying to teach people in some way. It was estimated at the top of these stairs he had probably 750,000 hours of people time over a period of a year, making his potential behavioral impact huge. He also had some formal complaints. If you actually study law in the UK, there's a case you learn as one of the cases, which is a guy called Stanislaw Was, had to remember his name. Stanislaw Was took this guy to court because he got yelled at, your hair's going grey, your skin's sagging, and that's because you're a sinner. And you're going to burn in hell, I think he added on the end of it. He admitted, this guy, that he probably did make the comments, but the case was actually eventually dismissed. Just as they were about to try and do some survey on the work of what this guy did, this guy upped and moved to a different location. So they're now going to have to go and re-find him and start again and see what the numbers are. But a scatter approach actually had a negative connotation. Now hold that in your brain. Why do I mention it? What bearing does it have on what we're doing? Well, he had great intentions. He thought about his model. He tried to get to the masses. He underestimated his impact. What was the completion rate? Was there a measure? Hello, I've seen this before. This sounded like so much e-learning that I'd looked at. Now I looked at that, and then I started looking at advertising. How much advertising do we actually see? Now, you probably saw what was written in the message that made you sign up for today. But does exposure means you have or could have paid attention? How much do we see? Well, an estimated the average American reading 1.5 newspapers, half a magazine, 1 piece of direct mail, listening to 2 hours of radio and watching 3.8 hours of TV, gets exposed to 560 advertisements or messages in a 16-hour period. There are some people who say that's 3 times that number. Would we be exposed to, well, let's think about it. It's 200,000 in a year. You'll notice only 76. You'll only remember 12, and 3 of those, yep, we do negatively. So if we don't get everything right, as you can see from the message painted on the floor, that's actually sitting in London. It's quite a famous one. I don't know why I haven't burnt it off and redone it, but it's quite funny. Not quite sure who or where the education came from the person who did that, but they actually left it on the floor when they went away. So it means we don't get everything right, but how much do we get wrong? Here was a direct approach of advertising. An advertising person has normally, well, if you drive down the highway going home tonight, how many billboards do you go by, and what were the messages that are on them? How many of them do you remember? They've got a matter of seconds to put something in your brain so you remember it the next time you go and buy it. Are we doing the same in e-learning? Why do I mention this? What bearing does it have on what we're doing? Once again, great intentions. They thought about the model. They tried to get to the masses. Yep, they probably underestimated the impact. Do they know the completion rates? Are there measures? We can carry on, can't we? So here's my question. How do we track this? What do we want to track? Who did what and when? Because that's what we're doing now with our learning management systems. Are we fooling ourselves about how many people really completed and how many people learned? I question who is the they. Do they behave differently? Do we measure the behavior being differently? Do we know? Somebody said, do we care? Well, I know we care. I certainly care. I'd like you to hold your hand up in the machine or type in if you care, because I guarantee you do, or you wouldn't be here. We've got great intentions. We thought about our models. Again, we're trying to get to a mass of some sort. I think we've underestimated the impact we're having. I don't think we know the true completion rates. And I've got data to back that up, where people have I've got a law firm in London where the reception team actually does their e-learning for them so they can get through their compliance training, so the lawyers never actually touch it. No real measure. Douglas, an interesting question you asked. Should we focus more on motivation? I hope so, but I think I want to motivate more. I want to focus in today on the behavior change, because I can see there's a bad pattern coming here. This is what people are saying at the moment. My LMS is not enough for me. How ready and competent are my people? It's difficult to contribute. Where do I start, especially with Experience API? I'm going to actually show you where to start right now. Do you need budget? No. I do believe you need no budget. And is there an impact? And let's have a very quick talk about big data and little data. There's an argument in the industry today that we should collect everything. Collect everything and sort it out later. And actually, I believe that's wrong. I think we need to decide what we need to collect. We need to decide what data we want and what data is going to be useful for us, and actually only collect the little data. Collect what we need and actually understand what it's telling us, and then act upon what we see, rather than collecting everything and getting completely bamboozled by it. So there's a first message for you to take away today, is let's think about the little data we can create and collect, and what can we do with it. So let's not even start about xAPI or looking at our LMS reports unless we really know what we're trying to look for. Let's try to make some decisions as to what's going to make a change, what's going to make it better. I work in an organization that when I joined last year, my first job ever, I've never had a job, and that sounds crazy. I worked for myself for 30-odd years. I got offered a job that I couldn't refuse, could not refuse. Came into a company that had 400 people in it in Silicon Valley. Looks pretty cool to me. We've now got 3,000 staff 8 months later. We're growing exponentially. We knew that was going to happen. And we're actually looking at the little data rather than the big data. The little data is the winner here, absolutely. So I want to throw a new approach at you. I'm going to give you this very quickly, because this is something that I wasn't going to put up today, but this is a paper that I've written internally here that actually will get published probably through either ASTD or the eLearning Guild very, very shortly. And it came about because everybody here who's an instructional designer talks around ADDIE and talks about how we actually go from assessment to design to development to implementation to evaluation. And we talk about creating storyboards in eLearning. And I actually said that this is wrong. This is called activity-based learning. Great for xAPI, because activity-based learning says that at every junction there should be an activity. There should be an activity that is useful, measurable, and mimics what they do in their real job, in the real world. And henceforth, I've come up with a new approach for developing learning, which talks about knowing the student and understanding the objective. The objective and the outcomes, by the way, is a whole other story. We can talk a whole hour on that. They are different. We start by creating our evaluations. No longer am I going to allow a piece of learning to be created and then we'll trawl through it trying to make up 20 questions. We create our evaluation, decide how we're going to evaluate first, and then we write lesson plans around it. Plan our activities, create an assessment map that matches, and then we create our storyboards, give it to a developer, test the content, and out we go. Now, we can put xAPI into this, and we can run this through the learning management system. So let's have a look and see how. Here are two different paths to the same event, or to the same end, using the same process that's used, or same thought process that's used in neural programming. So what goes on in the brain? We might start at different places. We have a set of hidden items, which actually are interventions of learning, and we direct people to an output. And yes, absolutely, Paul, begin with the end in mind. We have a direction to get to. Now, the concept here is that here's two different paths to do it. The two different paths say that in the first one, the person makes various decisions and gets to the output. In the second one, they may start from a slightly different place, get given the same set of interventions and make different decisions, and end up at the same output. Now, we can score these. In the first one, someone scored 7. In the second one, they've scored 11. I'm going to talk you through this in a slightly different way, but this shows how we actually measure a behavior change. At each of these junctions, which I call nodes, we can write to xAPI. Now, what is xAPI? xAPI is very simply a statement that contains information, and we'll look at the actual statement very shortly, but a statement that contains information that will write directly into a database, but it's not front-end like learning management system. It's back-end. It's not something that the user logs in and sees. It's information that is being driven in the back-end, which allows us to watch things like pathways through learning. It allows us to see what people are doing and where they are, what decisions they made, and a number of other things that, well, in fact, you can make decisions any way you like, because at every one of these nodes, we can send a piece of data that will write into a database. All those bits of data can then be collated together, so we can actually see what an individual did, or what a group of people did, or what everybody did at one particular node. It'll become more obvious as we go further. So let me explain it to you. Let me give you a scenario. It's funny that, Bobby, you mentioned Ralph Lauren. This concept started at Ralph Lauren, which is very funny, during conversations at Ralph Lauren in London. And it never happened with them, but it happened with another client. The story here was that Mary, shown on screen, works in a flagship store in a large mall for a top company. The woman on screen is not called Mary, and the store is not the store that was in question, so I put that up front. She goes to work on a Monday morning. About 10 minutes after the store opens, there is an argument in the middle of the store where this salesperson drags something out of the hand of the person who was trying to buy it, and throws the woman out of the store, throwing her bags after her, and then marches off to a coffee room. Now, this comes from the 2-minute manager concept. And the 2-minute manager concept says, hang on a minute, I need to act here. I need to do something about this. What can I do? What should I do? What are my options here? What should I do with this employee who has just done, as far as I'm concerned, something awful? Now, setting aside the fact that the person, Mary, happens to be your best salesperson, has won salesperson of the month every month for the last 18 months, you have to make some decisions. Now, we just pulled up 3 or 4 different ideas of what you could do. You could give her a verbal warning, you could give her a written warning, you could suspend her, you could fire her, you might come up with something else. When the first conversation started between the manager and Mary, Mary refused to talk about it. I am just not talking about it. I have no interest in talking about it. I'm not going to do it. What happened in this instance was the manager decided to give her a written warning. Now, written warning in the UK is you get a letter, you have to sign to say you've had it, and if you get more than one of these things, it's sort of the next step in, or a step towards actually firing her. Nicole, the answer is we don't know why Mary threw the customer out, because Mary refused to talk about it. Therefore, it was behavior that we weren't willing to accept. What Mary did on receiving the written warning was screw it up and threw it at the manager and said, I quit, and walked out the door. Now, the scenario goes that the phone now rings and the manager's manager is on the phone saying, your sales figures are down this week. Why are your sales figures down? If you don't do something about it, your head's going to be on the line. Which in reality is what happens. Now, we built this into an e-learning scenario that took more than the 3 minutes I've just explained it to you in. But at every junction and every decision, we were writing information in the back end. We were watching the decisions that were made. All of these decisions that were available to be made were given to the end user, and they could see by rolling over on a screen what the action was, what the likely outcome was going to be, what the purpose of it was, and how would it affect the business in either way. And you had to make a decision. Interestingly, of the 250 people who went through this training, I'd say about 19% decided on written warning. There was a large percentage that actually said they would suspend them pending finding out more. A very, very, very small amount actually said a verbal warning. Keep that in mind as we move on. Now, what happens in xAPI? In xAPI, we've written some statements, we put them into a database, and we have generated, based upon your result and what you've done, we've generated you an email that is now giving you some links to go and have a look at other documentation, information about how you could have done this in a different way, your different alternatives, what was right, what was wrong, and eventually calls you back on your mobile phone into the system. Now, this is interesting. This is a blend that not many people have seen. This is a blend that says we're taking this action outside of the course. We're running a script on the xAPI information. We're identifying what you did and how you did it, and based on a set of criteria, we will send you an email with some links to some other information. We may send you an email and assign you a different course within the learning management system to go and do. And in this place, we've even sent you a text message that's giving you some more information on the phone. So we've actually mixed one with the other. Now, yes, we could say there's no context here, and the context was in the learning. It wasn't just a 3-minute learning course. This has been going through the concept of the 2-minute manager. But what we were trying to do was to see if we presented this person with a similar but different scenario after we had presented them with more learning based upon what they've done and more information based upon their outcome, would they actually think about this in a different way? And here, now they've read the information, because by reading the information we've triggered another xAPI statement back to a database. We've now sent them a new text message that said, thank you for reading the information that we've sent you. Now come back into the learning course, and we've given you a code to type when you come in, which will take you to the right place in what we're calling the environment. Remind me not to work at this place. I put it up there. The warehouse of this company, same company that Mary worked at, the warehouse has one forklift truck. That's not it. That's a toy forklift truck. I got it out of VAT19.com. Thank you, VAT19.com. I had to try and find a picture of a forklift truck. Couldn't find what I wanted. And, well, the only one we could find was a toy one, so I'm putting it up here today. But the concept says that in the afternoon of that same day, there's a problem. There's a problem in the warehouse. The warehouse forklift truck driver, the only forklift truck driver, has just done something rather silly, has driven his forklift truck into a pile of new stock that's arrived and knocked it everywhere, has parked the forklift truck, taken the keys out of it right across the entrance to the warehouse, and is now sitting in the tea room reading his newspaper. What do? Funny, we offered you the same options this time round. Here she is. What are your options? What do you want to do? And now actually the same group of people started to think about this in a different way. We believed that this was completely unacceptable. The person who was asked about it completely refused to talk about it. And they were very touchy as to whether they should go do a written warning, because they would never move the forklift truck. And they decided to actually book this guy into a room, take him into a room, and talk to him, whether he wanted to discuss it or not, but actually have an open conversation with him. And actually what turned out in the training as you went through it was, it turned out that this forklift truck driver called John and Mary, the girl who worked in the store, were actually engaged until Saturday afternoon, when something happened and they split up. And now there's a whole new context that arrived. And different decisions get made and different ways of talking. This guy was actually sent home for a day to go and sort himself out, and everybody had a different view of it. But the different scoring took place. When we had a look at the results, people who had been through this actually said that they would start to think about this in a slightly different way when it came to discipline. They wouldn't be as harsh. They would be more interested in talking to people first before making decisions and moving forwards. Now, let's just put the content and the context of this aside. We believed when we went through this and looked at it at a later date that watching the learning pathways and watching the decisions people made at every junction here, and having sent them the text messages and information via their mobile phone to call them back into the training, once again, we actually had a different level of interaction with the end user, and we began to see behavior change. At this point, the people who had been through this training and had made a change were now invited into an HR lounge. We gave them a different access code to get into a different place, and they were allowed to get into a lounge where they actually began to start to discuss with each other. That was built, by the way, in Jive, another one worth having a look at, but it introduced a pretty interesting corporate lounge. Now, let's look at the technology that's going on here, because this is what xAPI is all about. We've got HTML and score. That's only going to tell us what we've done, when we did it, and what we scored. It's not really going to tell us very much information. We've got LMSs that will actually talk about or control or give us information about learners and courses and modules. We've got an LRS, this Learning Record Store, which really is just a SQL Server database that is collecting statements. And we'll look at a statement in a minute and show you how that works. You can create reports in the LRS. If you have a look at, you can go and sign up for free at, I think, Wax LRS, and actually have a look at one and have a play with it. And you will find that you can get various reports. But they're reports that are written specifically by the LRS people or the LMS people. By the way, I do also suggest that the LMS data and the LRS data should be kept completely separate. LMS is a learning management tool that will tell you what courses people have taken. The LRS is really this data that we want to be interrogating and having a look at. Of course, what I've put onto here is PHP and SMS, because what I did on this instance was I not only sent email out, but I sent SMS messages to their phone. And what we did was we interrogated the LRS information, which is only a SQL Server database, using a bit of PHP code running on the server, so a server-side piece of code. If you want to see it, I can bring one up and have a look at, that basically went and did a search every day at a certain time on the LRS, and actually then made some decisions based upon the PHP code as to what to do next, whether to send SMSs out, whether to send emails out, whether to reintroduce themselves to the end user. In fact, end users who hadn't been into, I hadn't had a statement written for X period of days, and we knew exactly where they were based upon which statements they'd written, got an SMS to say you need to come back and carry on where you left off, so give them a gentle prompt to carry on. So let's have a look at data flow here. A user starts at an LMS. xAPI is sending statements during their e-learning. So we've actually built the xAPI statements into our existing LMS-driven learning. So we've got both running at the same time. It's a bit of code that is dropped onto the HTML page. That's all it needs. Each number of days or hours, a script on the server runs and identifies data in those statements. So we're not identifying data in the LMS, we're looking at data that's sitting in the LRS. Based on that, we're responding back to the user. The user reads or gets information, reading the information that they are sent. More statements are written. The SMS is generated again to call people back. The user re-enters the LMS. Failure to return generates more. We've got a bit of a two-way going on here, and we've got data about who's done what and where, and we can see what differences they're making about the decisions they're taking. So a standard LMS, as we all understand, is quite straightforward. The xAPI is built around the concept of an, as you can see here, of an active-verb object. That's the basis, right? But that's the top level, 3 of 7. Some people say or respond to as I did this. The actor is the person involved, the verb is what they did, and the object is what they did it to. If you have a look on the left of the screen here, you'll see this is a piece of code that's come out of a real one to do with where we were playing with the scenario that I've shown you. And you'll see that the actor is me. It's got I'm defined by my email address. It's the only thing that we've really got that's really unique is our email address. I've added into that my given name and my family name. It's not necessary to have it, but especially when your email is neil@neillasher.com, it's a bit silly. But if my email address was abc@123.com, it's sometimes good to identify somebody by name. And here, the verb, or what we did, was make a decision. And you'll see that there's a link to an HTTP address where the decision is a known verb. and this is an activity. It was based upon my disciplinary choice, and I decided a written warning. This has gone into, that's exactly what has gone into the learning record store. I can now do searches on who did or who said written warning, based on who said written warning between 2 dates, and I can send them all an SMS. Here it takes it slightly further. We've taken this further that says not only did I send a written warning, but I can now put context into it. So my context is a choice value. Now, the first part of the choice value you don't need to understand. That's a code that I've generated, which makes this unique, and it's based upon a timestamp. But the last 2 numbers, or the last piece of the number, is really important. I've given this a score of 20 points. So this is actually part of the same statement, and now there's a set of points. So I can actually start to look at who has got how many points within the LRS, who has progressed, and who has got more points. If I have a look at it here with the second identifier, because I chose in this time, the description was none, I had a conversation, I've actually awarded 120 points. So now I can actually begin to decide who has how many points, what can I do with it? Have I given somebody a value? Can I see an increase of value? If I throw something else at them and I take them through another set and I ask them more about what would they do, which areas would they do things, and I then look at the data flow again, what would happen now? Would I actually be able to see that people with a higher value are actually doing things in a different way, beginning to think differently? Now, to make this work, we need to build environments, not a single course. It would be great to create lots and lots and lots of small pieces of environments, small activities that all link together and are all driven by the LMS, but are all scored and are all measured by the LRS. And the LRS, of course, can create all sorts of reports. So we can issue badges to people. We can create mastery scores. We can look at question analysis, what people have done, what they haven't done. We can see what people thought was popular or not popular. What we've done here is we've looked at the user who has attempted something new and made decisions. We've given the user feedback on their actions, and we've taken them outside of the course and invited them back to try something similar once they've read that information. We can see the decisions that people are making. We can see an increase in value. We can actually see a change in behavior, people doing things in different ways. And I think that value is the beginnings of the power of what xAPI will do for us. Now, when you start to put your head to this and you start to look at, we can put this into the airline industry. We know when a pilot had a hard landing. We can start to look at because when he has a hard landing, the equipment sends something to an LRS. We can look at what routes did the guy fly. It's funny, every time he flies from Singapore to New York and then on to the following morning on to LA, he has a hard landing at LA. We've either got to stop him flying those routes or we've got to do some retraining somewhere. Is it certain pilots that always have the same issues in different places? In the airline industry, we can take it to check-in staff. How many key presses are they doing to actually check somebody in? Is it that certain people in certain airports are actually using, are charging less for baggage than others? And this is what's called workplace flow as well. So we can put xAPI right into the workplace. It doesn't have to be in learning. It could be right in the workplace to measure what people are actually doing during their day and during their job. With xAPI, we can assess, track, and contribute. We can get some really good insights. When we have little data, not big data, we can start to really narrow our lookup and see what people are doing. We can provide meaningful recommendations. Hopefully we make a case for more money. We support learning in the workflow. We call it workplace workflow rather than learning workflow. And of course, we can hopefully improve employee effectiveness, which is the aim of what we're doing. Two things to read, so I can take you further. There's the environment model, which was published at Learning Solutions magazine, which is an eLearning Guild. Just go to eLearning Guild and have a search in Learning Solutions for the environment model. I actually really go into more depth in that paper on the environment model. And there's a very interesting one at my own website at neillasher.com called the Incapability Index, which you may find fun. It was written tongue-in-cheek, but it's interesting how the tongue-in-cheek ones always seem to come out and be successful. And this basically said, let's stop measuring how capable people are and let's try and work out how incapable they are. Find the ones that are incapable and then intervene and do something about it. Is it a can of worms? No. I think this is probably one of the biggest, most important changes that e-learning has seen since the beginning. I don't say we get rid of the LMS. This is not going to replace the LMS. This is not going to replace school. This is something that actually gives us some real insight of what's going on inside our learning, inside our workplace, that we can make use of, and actually we can do it for free. It's not a big deal. It's not hard to do. When I first started, I had no idea at all what to do with it, although I watched it from the very beginning. But when we got to about 0.96 before release, I finally downloaded some stuff and decided to really have a go at making it work. And what you saw working with the LMS and learning and the SMS and PHP and all the stuff that's there, I put together myself without any assistance from the outside in probably 3 or 4 days. It's not that difficult. If you need help, yes, there are lots of people out there willing to give it. You can always get hold of me, neil.lasher@fireeye.com, or at Neil Lasher on Twitter. I'll be most happy to point you in the right direction. We'll give you some further information how to do it. It's about 7 minutes to, so I'm going to throw it open to some questions. Bobby, do you want to take it back from here?
Yeah, thank you very much. Big hand here, big hand. Excellent, excellent. Every bit as good as the first time I saw it. I think this is one of those things that we all should be getting excited about. Granted, we're in the beginning here, you know, and a lot of folks, I think one of the challenges that we're facing here is getting people to understand the concept, understand what this really can mean to us as a professional community, really to everybody in terms of our ability to impact change. And you're absolutely
Bobby, there's a couple of things I will say. And there's a couple of questions, just having a quick look back and through, having a see. Nicole talked about gamification. You want to put scoring into gamification, Nicole? Yeah, and absolutely no problems at all. And you can write statements in the middle of a game. I see also that John Delano's online. There's a guy's name that you want to get hold of. I see he's popped in. I'm embarrassed to see you here. Hello, John. John Delano's from Saltbox, so he knows more about xAPI than most people. He'll certainly show you how to link it into other systems. Type to him now, grab hold of John. I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions that actually came. I think that some of the stuff's been answered, but if anybody's got any sort of real questions, please yell and let's take 5 minutes and see if we can answer some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Type them in the chat. Type them in the chat, and we'll see while we have Neil here if we can get these answered for you.
While you're typing, you talked about what I did at the Olympics, and would I?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good. Tell us.
Maybe
about
one
it.
day you'll invite me back, because I've got a fabulous presentation I put together not long after it that actually shows the path that we took to train 200,000 people over a period of time, but how we rolled out 1 million hours of learning. People say to me today things like, have you ever worked on anything large? How does this scale? And I laugh. Or they ask me what is the biggest training course I ever ran, and I walked out on stage with a well-known comedian in the middle of Wembley Arena with 10,000 people in the crowd. Have I run a big training course? Yes, I have. It was as scary as hell.
Folks, any questions? Any questions for Neil? I guess I have one or two, and I think you answered the one. Do you foresee a day in the not too distant future that This comes as maybe an add-on or an option or just something that's part of the LMS package that runs in the background. And you could sort of, you don't really need to do the programming, but it happens sort of automatically in support of, based on the individual learner's activities.
I'd like to say yes, and I'd like to say no in the same answer. And it's a tough one to answer, but one that I'll have a go at. The concept of what we want to identify, and if I go back to, I'm going to fly all the way back to one of my slides very near the beginning. If I fly back to this slide here, one of the big things that we are doing wrong is and I really do believe we're doing wrong, we have relied on the learning management system people to tell us what we want to know in learning. We have relied on the learning management system people to tell us what reports we want to see. We have relied on the learning management system to tell us how we think this should happen. And what the LRS does here, and the concept of xAPI, is it allows us to design what data we want to collect and how we want to collect it so that we can use it. And that's really the big difference. So if I said, saying yes, it would be nice if it was really easy. I think it would be really good that, could we write a statement within our learning, because the learning says check the following boxes and type in here what you want to find out, and we'll build it for you. That would be really nice. It might be a bit of a pipe dream at the moment, but maybe it's not too far away. I think what's more important and much harder to get one's head around is the analytics. How do we analyze the data that we've collated? We talked to a large DIY company some time ago. I won't say which one it is, but they got a big orange sign. I think you know what I'm talking about. They reckoned they could generate something like 1 billion statements in a year. Now, what do you do with 1 billion statements? Mm-hmm. How do you analyze it? I don't think you can even get the concept how big 1 billion is. How do you begin to analyze the data that's in it? And that's one of the big issues for me. So I think that the people who come out with an analytics tool that allows you to, using checkboxes, click on the bits of information you want to analyze, and it will give you a set of reports based on how you want it. A bit like the old days of if anybody's ever used Crystal Reports, they'll know what I'm talking about. A bit like the old days in the beginnings of Crystal Reports, who would take a SQL Server database and actually create the reports you wanted based upon what was in it. And when that comes, then that's probably better for us than actually getting it to be aligned with the learning or built into the learning management system. My fear with the learning management system people, to be very honest with you, I don't know if there are any on, but my fear with the learning management system people is they're going to mix the two data. They're going to mix the data of the LRS and they're going to mix the data of the learning management system. One is metric, one is analytic.
Yeah.
Rachel's asked a question, how do you get senior management to develop beyond the traditional e-learning methods for adult learners? Okay, I think the answer to there is you have to re-educate senior management in some way. Some are married to old, outdated ISD models, but I think the answer there is, are you being employed to do what senior management wants, or are you being employed to bring something fresh and vibrant into your organization? I work for a company here who have a great senior management, and yeah, when I come up with a new idea, everybody's willing to have a look at it and think about it. We all sit down, we talk about it, and most of the times we run with it, which is really great. Not all of them work. I think we have to re-educate our senior management to say, hey guys, times are changing, things have changed, people are learning in different ways. What do we want to do? Do we want to become a dinosaur, or do we want to move forwards? Yeah, scary place, have to be tough. I've been a hard ass for years, why not carry on?
I think that's one of the things I enjoy about you the most, Neil. Anybody else? A lot to think about, a lot to know. Yeah, it is, and it's new too. You know, just to wrap it up here, I see a lot of connection here, or possibility with competency-based education in traditional kind of education, higher ed, K-12, that kind of thing, as well as training and learning, because let's face it, learning is learning, and if there's no change, then nobody learned anything. Correct. So I think that I appreciate so much your being here today. I think we had a great session. I'd just like to invite everyone to our last session for 2014, which will be again noon to 1 o'clock, second Tuesday of the month in May. We will be with Intrepid Learning, and they will be talking to us about corporate MOOCs, which is massive online open courses, and we will see what they have to say about that. I mean, to me, the entire concept of corporate MOOCs is a little scary, considering the great success we have not had with them in higher ed. So anyway, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Neil, thanks for joining us from the Silicon Valley. I will be in touch. Enjoy that beautiful, beautiful weather out there. We will hang around, folks, for a couple minutes.
I wish I could enjoy it. I'm going to run from here now to cross the hall to another course and get in the back and see what the hell's going on with the course I designed.
Well, good luck with the beta, and thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule to be with us.
Guys, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, for a couple minutes. We're going to stop the recording, folks, and we hope to see you in May. Thank you very much.